Are we hot?
Oh, Jesus H. Christ on a cracker. We're hot.
We're hot? Oh, that's a hell of an intro. So listen, everybody needs to know this. This is really important. So I'm excited about today, but we had some technical difficulties.
Oh, you can say that again.
And Q had a mini meltdown. We almost damn near had to melt the building down and reduce it down to gold and harvest it. It was insane. He was cursing. He was screaming. I seen wires go flying. He was like a human wood chipper in there. I don't know what happened, and I don't know if we still have a studio, but if this may be my last broadcast, if anybody's listening. So
the man keeping the black man down.
Seriously. So this is a lot of fun. We're all clearly wired today for sound because we have the absolute coffee expert with us today. We're going to get into all things coffee, and we're insanely caffeinated. So this is going to be a fun episode, and we're going to talk a little UFC. We're going to talk a little bit about the fight game. We're going to have so much to get into because I'm really intrigued by this because coffee has kind of taken every genre over. It's like I feel like it's like coffee and soap has taken everything over. Everybody's in the soap game. Everybody's in the coffee game. So I'm really excited to get into this. I have a long-time supporter of the show and someone who's kind of close to me through a fighter, Matt Brown. We got the one and only Conor Flynn. So
pleasure to be here and caffeinated with you today.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the technical difficulties because clearly you looked horrified when Q started throwing things. It got weird, but
angry black man.
Angry black. So this is really a fun episode for me because I've had a relationship with Matt for a while now. We did podcasts together a ways back, and we managed to have dinner, and we did one recently, and he started telling me about his coffee, and everybody's in the coffee game, and I was kind of like, coffee, geez, and when he connected us, I was a little like, all right, here we go again, it's another coffee company, da-da-da-da. But coffee's on fire right now, and coffee's been a thing everybody's been getting into, and you've been in the coffee game for a while. How did you get into coffee, and why does coffee how has it become a thing?
Well, I got into the coffee game because I had some friends that own some farms in Central America, and they're actually importing green coffee.
Is that all they're importing?
As far as I know. I have some business partners from Mexico, and our roasting team, they're third-generation Colombians. So if you wanted to get into the stereotypes about where things are coming from, people might get some other ideas about what we're doing. But everything's legit, I promise you.
Okay.
But yeah, they were importing green coffee, and I was back working in the corporate world, and they wanted me to help out because one of my past business dealings, I helped out in terms of brokering agricultural commodity trade deals. So I started looking at the coffee market, and I was always really into coffee like everybody else. So I started going to the Specialty Coffee Association Global Expo and learning more about it, and it was one of those things I just gravitated to naturally, where I'd hear something, the information would stick, and then I'd find myself regurgitating it to people later and being like the fanboy of coffee. So I looked into that and I said, well, wait a minute, with the internet now and I'm working in corporate America, my business experience starting other businesses before, why not start roasting coffee and, figure it out from there and create a brand? So we had started RX Coffee, was one of the brands we started in the past, before Immortal Coffee, and set it up online, just started small, found a local roaster in South Florida to kind of roast the coffee I'd select coffee with, and then kind of went from there. And it's just kind of grown, and then eventually I was able to leave the corporate world behind. As I used to say, I wore a costume 9 to 5 every day.
Oh my God,
was a suit
I love that.
Sometimes a tie, pretend to be somebody I wasn't at the water cooler, and
oh my God,
can't wear a T-shirt or whatever I want every day. But it's been kind of a dream come true. And then forging together the coffee company is my other passions, whether it's fitness or martial arts and things like that. It just really came naturally.
Yeah, and coffee's become a thing. It's, there's so many companies out there. You have Black Rifle, you have you guys, and everybody now is doing the CBD infused stuff. Everybody's starting to get into all these different roasts, and coffee is something that I feel has burst onto the scene, and not a lot of people talk about because it's not an exciting thing, but why is it coffee has come on so strong?
Well, I think you have to look back at the origins of coffee and realize, well, caffeine is probably the most widely consumed drug in the world, if you want to call it that, because it's stimulant effects. It's all natural, so it's consumed worldwide, really, at this point. You'll hear some people say it's the second most traded commodity in the world. I've heard differing facts on that, but it's consumed everywhere now, and the culture has grown more and more. And look, people can hate on Starbucks. One of the things I like about companies like Starbucks is the fact that they brought attention to the coffee culture. They've done a great thing in terms of getting it out there widespread across America and other parts of the world. So people gravitate to coffee every morning, right? So people drink their coffee before they work out. Some people drink decaf, even though what I like to say about decaf is it's only good if you throw it at someone. But it's just really something that's people gravitate to every morning.
It's a communal thing.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a communal thing. So coffee is something that I feel is an interesting one because people overlook it a lot in marketing and branding and putting their brand out there. But people that do get into it, I feel like I've not seen a lot of people not have success with it. I feel like it's a very calculated decision. But, you know, it's interesting that Matt got into it, knowing the type of guy he is. He got into this, and he's had phenomenal luck with it from what I've seen.
Yeah, and, you know, Matt was like everybody starts off drinking coffee when they're younger. They take a sip, they don't really like it, and they go through that phase of I want to add sugar or creams or other things to it. Nobody really generally takes a sip of black coffee and likes it right away. So Matt was like everybody else. You'll hear TJ Dillashaw posted a video telling the story about Matt just being a guy that thought like regular Starbucks or other coffees were really good, and they educate on him. And he talked about, you know, he's come a long way in terms of his knowledge on it. And I've helped educate Matt on it. But, you know, it's one of those things. You use it pre-workout, post-workout. It's great for helping out with intermittent fasting. People are into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can add it to your shakes. You can add it to so many other different products. I mean, there's even coffee rubs for steaks that people use.
Oh, you don't make that, do you?
No, but you're giving me ideas now.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm writing that down. I want 5%. So there's also people use it in the shower.
Yeah, we've actually done some. We can actually do coffee scrubs. We haven't started selling them under the Immortal brand yet, but it's something we've done locally in Miami through a partner of ours where they'll take our coffee and they'll create scrubs for it in the shower.
Now, it's supposed to help you with your mood, right? It's supposed to be like a mood enhancer too. I wonder if we could enhance your mood through coffee. That might help.
Coffee soap.
Coffee
Coffee
soap.
soap.
I would do that. I'd buy that. So I've noticed soap and coffee come on the scene really aggressive. And you guys are very calculated in your approach, and you've had a lot of really good strategic marketing. And I think where you market yourself in who you're talking to and dealing with has been really smart. And there's no mystery. You know, Joe's talked about it on his show. It's a phenomenal product. You have a bunch of roasts. We brew it every morning here. We love it. And we're owned by Armenians, so the Armenian culture, they love their coffee, and they enjoy their coffee, and they're brewing it every day. It's one of those products that I feel not only brings people together, but it's also something that people take so seriously. People don't screw around with their coffee.
Absolutely not. And so what we deal in with all of our coffee, it's referred to as specialty coffee. So the background of specialty coffee, it was in the 1970s in the Tea and Coffee Trade Journal where that term first came about. But to explain specialty coffee, it's really simply put the best of the best, and you'll have that term thrown around loosely by a lot of people. But to be considered specialty, it has to go through a rigorous selection process. So generally speaking, first step is they go through 350-gram samples, and when the beans are dried and green, to make sure there's no Category 1 defects. Category 2 defects can add up to Category 1, but there has to be 0 Category 1 defects to be considered specialty, so it's scored then. Then, after the coffee's roasted, it goes through a process called cupping, which you have these little cups and you slurp with a spoon, kind of like a sommelier would do with wine. And that's scored by a licensed Q grader from the Specialty Coffee Association on a scale of 1 to 100. And to be considered specialty, has to be over 80. And we don't look at any coffees that score below 85. So in our process, when we get our coffees, we get samples in from other farms or direct from the source of our partners' farms in Colombia, or from large co-ops, which are large-scale nonprofits that create economies of scale to import the beans. And we'll get all these different samples each year from the farms, and then we'll do sample roasting, do the process of cupping. We'll eliminate ones we don't think are good, and then we'll do what's called profile roasting when we actually select the coffee to roast it, you know, this many degrees for this long. Let's let the roast develop a little further to see if it brings out these flavors and really dial in how the actual coffee tastes before we even sell it to the public. So we take it very, very seriously for each one of our coffees. And, you know, right now we have coffee from Ethiopia, which is actually the birthplace of coffee, Costa Rica, Colombia. We use some Brazilian beans in some of our blends, you know, Vietnam. People don't even realize that 60% of the world's coffee actually comes out of Colombia, Brazil, and Vietnam. Most people don't think of Vietnam as a coffee-producing country, but it's an actual different species of coffee typically that will come out of there.
And the markup on coffee is good.
It is. It depends where you're getting it from. So in the United States, The only place really that typically grows coffee is in Kona in Hawaii. And if you see affordable coffee from Hawaii, especially Kona, generally speaking, let's say the bag's $10, $12. It's probably not 100% Kona coffee. What they do is they put fillers in from Central America, places like Costa Rica or Honduras to fill in the flavor of it. So I think last I checked, it was maybe 30% of the beans actually have to be from Kona. But really good Kona coffee is usually $20 a pound just for the green beans. But because the cost of production is much higher.
Yeah, this is educating. So what does it mean? Talk to me about what fair trade coffee means and what green coffee means.
Well, green coffee is, coffee, except for maybe one or a few of the different plants that might have just one seed, but it's not actually a bean. So these are actually seeds that we're roasting. So there's two seeds inside what looks like a cherry. Sometimes they can be yellow, depending on the varietal of coffee plant. So to really explain coffee, I'll explain there's over 70 species of coffee, but there's two main ones that people drink. There's Cafe Arabica, which is what these beans are, which you'll find in most Starbucks or specialty coffee shops, and they originate in Ethiopia and East Africa. Then there's Cafe Canephera, Canophera, and that's referred to as Robusta, which originates in West Africa. So the difference is Robusta grows at lower altitudes and generally yields a higher crop, so you're going to get more out of it. But it generally has more of a bitter a taste to it. And it's grown in places like Vietnam as well. And then Arabica beans tend to grow at higher altitudes and are the more desirable coffees.
What's the best way to brew it?
It all depends on the person, right? So some people really like, Chemex, where it's the glass with the wooden handle, and that's referred to as pour-over, which you can also use a V60 or any other drip type method. There's espressos. AeroPress is really good, but it makes a small amount of coffee. Your regular drip machine. Some people like French press, which is an immersion method. So if you actually have the coffee and it just soaks in the water itself, that's referred to as the immersion method. But one of my favorites, it depends on the coffee, right? So I like coffees that are East African varietals. I'll do a pour-over, nice drip, and then there's, you have the whole art of espresso. There's really a lot of science that goes into that because you got to play, depending on where the coffee's from, how it's roasted, you got to play with the grind size. You can over-extract it, under-extract it. And a term you might hear me use a lot is referred to as dialed in, which is what people use in coffee, of how to get it to taste the way you want.
And they're crazy about coffee in Miami. It's like a part of their life. And I know you went down and you spent some time at the Knockout Zone with some mutual friends of ours, and Diego and the boys. They're lunatics about the coffee. It's a big deal. And I know they're always brewing the Cuban coffee. And it's like, you have a little shot glass and you're awake for 3 days.
Oh, yeah. It's like they said that the reason why meth never took off in Miami is because of Cuban coffee.
I believe that. I actually believe that. I have no doubt in my mind that there's meth-like properties in that Cuban coffee that keeps you awake for a day and a half. Now, I love the product. I love the stuff, and it's super educational here, and you talk about it because I don't know this much about it and about the product, but coffee is a cutthroat business. There's a lot of people getting into it now. It's people are getting hot and heavy with it. They're doing subscriptions. They're doing all these things. How do you stay relevant, and how do you stay out in front of people with it getting flooded?
Well, certainly having a UFC legend like Matt as a business partner is a go-to, and having that connection with the fight world helps promote it. But it's really about quality. So there's a few things we can always control. It's the quality of the coffee we source, how we roast it, and how we get it out to people, right? Mm-hmm. So if we don't have quality coffee, I wouldn't expect people to drink it because I wouldn't drink it every day myself.
Absolutely.
The only coffee I really don't drink is the Cuban style because it's an extra dark roast, but it specifically is formulated for colada, cafecito, cafe con leches, things like that. But you'd be surprised. We have people ordering in Kansas, Oklahoma, all over the country just want that really dark taste. So staying relevant, it's about the message you're delivering to your customers and the quality. But it all starts with quality, right? You don't have a good quality product, eventually you can market it, brand it, however you want. People just aren't going to buy it.
They're not going to buy it. Now, before we get to Matt and 245 and a lot of things going on and what brings you here this weekend, you're an athlete in your own right. You were ultra marathoner, I believe. What was it? You competed.
I did the Everglades 50, which is an ultra marathon through the Everglades back in March. I did with some of my friends from a gym called Focus Movement Academy. The coach there, Christian Bizzotto, I think I had mentioned to you before. So we all went out it was in the middle of the Everglades, and you're out there basically running all day for 50 miles. And there's snakes. I had to stop at one point on the trail. There was a poisonous snake in the middle of it, try to get it out of the way. There's 3-foot wide mud trails with roots popping out everywhere. There's alligators everywhere. I mean, I thought I was going to get eaten by an alligator at one point because one of them popped up out of the water and scared the shit out of me.
Right.
So that was a very intense thing. I do some CrossFit, weightlifting, functional mobility stuff. Try to do some MMA training.
And you had ties to the fight game. You've trained, so you kind of knew the mats a little bit. You've been around, and that has to obviously help you as you work closely with some of these guys. It's not an easy world to navigate for sure. But Matt is clearly one of the dudes. But you came and you parlayed that success in the business world into this business, and you can tell it's a huge passion of yours. You're teaching me things and talking about things that I knew nothing about, and I can hear the passion coming through. Where do you see the business going? What do you see going on in the next 3 to 5 years with coffee?
Well, one of the things we're trying to do is get more widespread distribution in retail, because one of the latest studies I've seen, 70% of people still buy their coffee in grocery stores. It's that whole out of sight, out of mind. I'm out of coffee. I need it right away in the morning. I can't wait for Amazon to deliver. So that's the way they want to get it. I'm sure that number will shrink some because there's more and more subscription programs, things like that. But what you're seeing a lot is our culture, everything is instantaneous, right? We don't sell K-Cups yet. I'm sure we will at some point in the future, because a friend of mine that owns another coffee company said if you sell K-Cups, you're selling your soul, because it diminishes the quality of the coffee.
Of course, yeah.
And you can make the arguments it's bad for the environment, et cetera. But I think there's a lot of things that are happening more with instantaneous coffee, and there's a whole movement around cold brew right now, especially Nitro infused cold brew. So we do a lot of that for gyms in the South Florida area. So we want to create a bottled or canned product that's Nitro infused cold brew. There's a big push for CBD getting involved with it, Nootropic infused coffees that we're going to do soon. There's just bringing the whole health aspect. I think the health aspect of coffee was lost for years, but it's like anything, right? If you have low-quality vegetables that you have in the frozen food section smothered with some kind of Velveeta cheese or something like that, and you heat it up in the microwave, who knows how much nutrition are you really getting out of it? Same thing with coffee. You want it to be fresh roasted, high quality, and then you've got a lot of the health benefits from it.
Of course.
So I think it's the health benefits, the different products that are coming out, and you're seeing more and more people consume coffee. But the biggest risk to the coffee industry is, these farms and the environmental damage that they have that, or, prices too, because most people don't realize there's a genetic bottleneck of coffee coming to the Western Hemisphere. So a lot of these, coffee farms are susceptible to certain diseases, and it can be widespread, and that'll drive the price of coffee up. Trade is also, can be an issue tying into that too. But as a whole, with the growth of coffee, it's always growing, but the specialty coffee market, which is a small section of that, has been growing at a much higher rate.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it, and there is a huge difference. I'm going to tell you right now, guys out there, when you drink a quality product of coffee, if you're just getting your coffee at like a Dunkin' Donuts or wherever, there's definitely a different quality to this. And I know that's sacrilege to all my friends from New England, so I'm sorry. I apologize ahead of time. I'm still a Dunks fan. There's such an emphasis on having that Starbucks cup in your hand, and people who go to Starbucks and spend $3-4 on a cup of coffee. Has the price of coffee gotten out of control in your opinion? Or
I think that a lot of the workers in these poorer countries, they don't get their fair share, so that's important when we source the coffee to make sure it's coming direct from a source that we know these people aren't taking advantage of. Because these people are getting paid pennies in comparison to what we make here, and then people sell it for $3, $4,
it's like
$5
a Malaysian
cup.
sneaker factory.
I mean, there's people that sell coffees for $7, or there's something called Kopi Luwak, which is it's like a servo cat where they shit out the coffee bean, and those cups of coffee or bags of coffee are $50, $100 or more, astronomical prices. So coffee can be, but the price right now, if you look at how it's traded on the commodities exchanges, is actually historically pretty low.
Is that because so much of it's being made?
It's the cost of production's low. Trade allows it, and I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons that I'm not typically aware of. But you're able to get it, into the United States, and it's rapidly available. Now, let's say there's widespread epidemic or disease or some kind of catastrophe that hits Central or South America, then you might have a big problem. And I'm sure, in Brazil, if these coffee farms get destroyed by wildfires or things like that, that could have an effect as well.
Of course, it'll drive the price up and affect the margin and everything in between. Now, this is something that I feel is super educational, and coffee is something that we've seen come into the firearms business really aggressively. We have companies like Black Rifle Coffee. We have companies that have come onto the scene that, have really taken a prominent role, particularly in the marketing and the branding of the firearms industry. So you see, a lot of that coming in. That's why having you educate us a little bit on where coffee comes in and how it fits into, everybody's program is really important, because we're used to it on our side of the house. And in combat sports, you've been kind of the gold standard in many ways. I don't hear or know of another brand out there in that arena. So you guys have kind of been the only game in town. Soap, there's a bunch of other companies out there, but you guys have been crushing it and doing really well, it seems. And I think I tend to believe that you guys are the only game in the UFC and in the fight game that I see.
I mean, I've seen some that have a tie into like jiu-jitsu or other things like that. I don't want to mention
No,
names or
of
anything,
course not. But this is
and
about you.
There's a lot of companies that, there's, you got Black Rifle Coffee Company. There's a company called Alpha Brew Coffee that I know the owner of, that former military guy that he owns, Ricky, that runs that company, good guy. And look, as far as other coffee companies, I got inspired by seeing other coffee companies. So I'm the kind of guy, when I meet people that run other coffee companies, I like to trade information. I met with a guy last night who owns a coffee company here in Vegas that they want to get widespread distribution and do a big CBD coffee, because you always get ideas and get inspired by other people. And there's a rich history of coffee around the world being involved in whether it's politics or shaping the future of the world. So at one point in time, coffee was actually illegal, because it was the place in coffee houses where people would congregate to discuss politics and all these other things, versus going out into these bars or drinking mead or whatever it was, and distracting people from it.
Yeah, it's crazy. So with that being said, coffee is probably one of the most widely used commodities. I don't know a lot of people that don't drink it at all. Maybe the Mormons, that's about it. But coffee is something that is, like I said, it's communal. It's been a part of our culture for a long time. I think every time we meet with someone or we're going to meet with someone, it's either let's grab a beer or let's have a cup of coffee. And that's something that I like, because it brings people together and it builds bridges. And I've always enjoyed it, and I think it's a great tradable commodity, kind of like a bottle of wine. Like, hey, let me bring you a pound of coffee. And I think, you came in here and you brought a couple of pounds, and we drink the stuff. And I'm going to be honest, it is one of those things. It's nice to have a product like that and something to say, hey, you want to go have a cup of coffee and have a story behind the coffee with you and with Matt and with everything that you guys have done. It's really phenomenal. Now, again, we talked about where it goes from here, and I'm super intrigued by this. Is Matt's brand and the Immortal Coffee brand, is that something that you guys will be fleshing out over the next 2 or 3 years and taking really to another level? And can we expect more products in the line?
Yes, we just released a CBD infused coffee. So we take our organic medium roast Columbia and we infuse that coffee with it, which we kind of have our own proprietary method, but we can actually do it in whole beans. So we're not adding any isolate powder to it. It's legit CBD coffee. You just don't want to use it with a paper filter. It's better to use like in a French press, metal filter, things along those lines. And we also do it with our Italian espresso. Coming soon, we want to launch our Nootropic infused coffee. We were talking about before. We want to do mushroom type coffee, other superfoods, and eventually package our Nitro infused cold brew like we do for gyms in actual cans, because we do it in kegs and on tap at a lot of gyms. So in South Florida, if a gym, for example, wants to have our Nitro infused cold brew on tap, we simply provide the kegerator, all the equipment, as long as they just buy the keg for us. I would love to do that other parts of the country. We just need to find somebody locally that can produce the coffee and do the deliveries.
We got to do that here, Q. We got to do the Nitro infused coffee.
Yeah, that's the shit.
That's
is
amazing.
The shit.
It's strong stuff, too.
We'll run it right
Definitely.
off your desk and into your mouth.
I'll snort that shit.
So, yeah, I mean, how long do you think before we see THC in coffee?
That's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that.
Because I feel like that's the delivery method.
If we went over to the Marijuana Business Expo, which is taking place right now in Las Vegas,
You can neither
they'd probably
confirm
give
nor
us-
deny that you visited.
Yeah, exactly. I think tickets were like $500 for that.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that delivery method would scare a lot of people because it'd be so easily shipped and it'd be so widely available that people would start to get scared what they're drinking. It's kind of like, Oh, I'm gonna, But the whole weed argument and that debate's a whole topic for another time. But I think it's only a matter of time before you start to see. And I know it probably exists already in some of these, what do they call them, dispensaries and
Yeah, I'm
shit.
sure there's stuff in California around other places in Oregon that they're doing all that kind of stuff, mixing it all together.
But before it gets widely spread, I think it's a matter of time, and you'll see a little subheading on your website like, not shippable in all 50 states or whatever. It'll only be where it's available with a medical card or at some point. But I think it's only a matter of time, and I think that's going to come, Connor. I have no doubt.
Oh, yeah, it's in the pipeline with the FDA where it can happen any day where they're going to come in and put stricter, because there's not, and look, their CBD has a lot of benefits, but there's really not a ton of research around all these claims that people are making. So there's always disclaimers you put on it. I just know from drinking it, and the coffee, it gives me like a slow, smooth, long-releasing, energetic effect. And the way CBD works on adenosine in the brain, it's a similar effect. So the idea is it kind of has a long, slown-out process with the caffeine, so you're not getting that crash, which we don't get. We always say we're the no-crash coffee because you don't really experience that with our coffee.
Yeah, you want the slow burn, but yeah, absolutely. I think it's only a matter of time that's going to come.
You mentioned about wine, and one of the things I want to mention about coffee that a lot of people don't know, it's actually the most complex beverage in the world. So there's identifiable volatile aromatic compounds in wine and coffee, and they've identified something to the tune of 800 to 1,000, I believe, in coffee, which is more than there is in actual wine. So if you ever Google the flavor wheel or flavor spectrum of coffee, you'll see all these different flavor notes. And people can get really foo-foo into it and say,
no, go ahead.
I was at a coffee expo, and they're like, we used 2 paper filters, and I poured it at a 37-degree angle, and blah, blah, blah. It's like some of that shit is way over the top, but there's ways to really dial in your coffee, whether it's temperature, grind size, coffee-to-water ratio. Suggested guidelines around that are what really can make a difference.
What's your favorite region in the United States that you feel has it dialed in for how they do coffee?
That's hard to say. I mean, because obviously in Seattle, you got a ton of coffee places. There's some cool spots I've been to in Denver. It really depends. The best coffee shops I've been to, and when I travel, I always look for gyms to go to and coffee shops. And I want to go in and figure out, well, what are you guys doing with your coffee? What do you have? And finding those or local roasters and see what they're doing too. I mean, there's some great places all over. But yeah, I'd have to say that in California or Oregon or Seattle, or they tend to
do some cool stuff.
There's so much rich history behind the coffee business out there too.
Yeah, they take it pretty seriously. I know there was a couple really good coffee shops in Montana, even and it's interesting how regionally, even in the United States, not like Europe, but there's a lot of areas people take their coffee pretty damn seriously. It's kind of it's a whole process, and it's a whole thing. And the coffee culture has really come a long way in the United States the last 15 years, because now everybody, I didn't know what a French press was when I was in high school. Now it's becoming a thing where everybody's kind of really having this process, and you go into even like our break room, we got 2 or 3 coffee makers laying in there.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and everybody has a process. Would you ever get into and how crappy is instant coffee? Garbage.
Yeah. You don't want to do that. I mean, there's some companies working on some interesting things that where they'll actually freeze dry coffee and things like that. But instant coffee, I mean, it's like
garbage.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the best way to explain it.
I have to learn. I'm gonna get the expert in here. This is why.
Yeah, don't do that. Find a local coffee shop that isn't a mainstream one. And this is one of the things, if you walk into a coffee shop, if they're a legit coffee shop and they know about specialty coffee, say, oh, what kind of pour over coffees do you do? If they're like, well, what's a pour over coffee? Okay, yeah, they don't know shit about coffee. Because most of these places you walk into, they'll just pump a machine, or they'll have certain companies will give them these espresso machines with pods, and they'll just press a button. It looks fancy, but at the end of the day, there's really no art behind it.
Yeah, there's no meat on that bone. But you're in town now for UFC 245. This is going to be exciting. It's a sick card. It's a freaking awesome event. 3 belts on the line?
Yeah, 3 title fights.
3 title fights on this card. And we have 2 friends going at it. Matt and Ben. And how does this play out?
Matt's my dude, man.
Yeah, of course you got to.
My
but
boy.
How does it play out?
He's laser focused. He's ready for this. I don't call the shots or anything, but the Immortal always pulls through.
Yeah, and what round and how does he finish?
I can't call those shots.
Come on.
Let's see what happens. But
I think I'm going to come right out and say it, and I have friends on both sides of the aisle. I think if the fight goes long, it works against Matt. I think if it works in Matt's favor, he's got to shorten up the fight. He's been out of the ring for a little while. He's got to get in there. He's got to do what he does, which he's a hammer. He's got a hammer. Ben has that ability with the jiu-jitsu and with the ground game. I think Matt's got to be careful there. But I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight of two icons in the industry. And I think whoever comes out of it, I've said this on multiple podcasts, whoever comes out of that fight, I think tosses themselves right into the mix in that welterweight battle. And then it's exciting because you also have Colby at the top, fighting Usman, and however that shakes out. And when it shakes out, I think one of these guys will be tossed right into the mix. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a great night. How it plays out, again, my prediction goes long, works in Ben's favor, goes short, works in Matt's favor. It's all dependent on how each of the fighters come out and what their game plan is and how that fits into it. There's no question, I don't think it's a secret. Being out of the game for a little bit of time, Matt has to understand, he's got to have his cardio up, going the 5, it's a long fight. So it's going to be interesting.
The thing about Matt, though, what people don't realize, even before the last fight he had against Diego with that elbow, the Hellbow they call it, he didn't fight for a year. So for Matt, though, he's always training. He's not one of these other guys that takes time off. Like, he's in the gym. He's at Immortal Martial Arts Center in Lewis Center, Ohio, right outside Columbus, and he is training all the time. He's a martial artist for life, or he's over at Westside Barbell lifting weights. Like, that's his life. He's not he's not a guy that goes out and parties or does anything. He's a family guy, and he's always ready. So he's always training. So for him, I don't think that cage rust exists for a guy like that. It didn't in his last fight, and he's always on point, and he's always training.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, and both of those guys' careers are so storied that, I see it as, there's been so much fun watching that division, with Jorge, Georgie, and just so much going on in Colby that I think, whoever comes out of it, if they make a big splash, they're going to be tossed right into that conversation of who's going to be next to kind of get a shot at George or get a shot at if Usman, if he stays in the game and battles back, or Colby if he pulls it out, if Colby pulls it out, or if, Usman retains. It's going to be fun to watch play out. You got to be excited. You'll be at the event. I'll be there. It's going to be electric, I think, and I think seeing the different title fights, and we can have a little fun, predicting some of them. Do you think Colby pulls it out against Usman, or Usman wins?
I don't know. That's the biggest question, I think, of this card is what happens there, because Colby's not going to get tired, but Kamaru also just puts pressure on guys constantly.
Yeah, I think if we could predict it, we wouldn't be sitting here and we'd be making a lot more money because we'd be at the window right now, making our bets, laying it down. But I think in that battle, it's going to be a lot of fun. But I believe, and I'm not being a homer because I had Colby on the show, and I think Colby pulls it out. The reason being is I just think he understands the points game better, and I think he knows how to come out and play that fight game, and I think his wrestling is good enough. There's been a lot of talk about Usman being a better athlete, but Colby's cardio is king. He can go 5 rounds and he barely breaks a sweat. So it's going to come down to Usman taking chances, and he's going to have one of those chances hit, one of those home runs pay off. I just see Colby being like that annoying gnat that keeps landing those kind of like he did in the Robbie fight, just keeps landing those little shots that it's just those add up, and it's just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It's like ringing the bell. And Usman, you can make the case for his ground game and his wrestling ability, but Colby's no slouch there either. So it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be a really great night. I think Nunez retains. I don't think
I can't see. That's the one I just can't see her losing. She's just too much of a beast.
I can't see her losing. She's a savage. I think Max loses. I think Max is focused on a lot of other things. I think he's already begun the transition out of the UFC. I think he gracefully bows out. Maybe, later on he has like one of those returns, but I see him doing the acting thing. He's got his hand in a lot of other stuff. So similar to, I think it was Woodley when he had a lot of other things going on. I just kind of see this as kind of a farewell dance for Max. He probably punched me for saying that, but
yeah, he was saying he wants to go up and wait after this if he wins.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't. I see him just having so many other things going on, and it's his time to have those other things going on, and that's fine. But if he can do it as a champion, then by all means, go ahead. But I see him kind of beginning to make that transition, and then on the horizon, it starts to get really fun, for everybody because we have Conor returning, and then
Right. The welterweight division is really just the most fun right now because there's so many what ifs. So you got Kamaru and Colby fighting, right? And then depending on who wins that, do they fight Masvidal? Because Masvidal says, hey, I want to fight Conor. I want to fight Nick Diaz.
Georgie right now, I think, is looking for the huge payday.
And the payday is Conor and Nick.
And the payday is Conor and Nick. So I see Georgie more as an outlier on an island. Can he go for the belt after this? Sure. He's in position to do it. Do I see him doing it? No. He's kind of moving and gravitating towards that island of like, hey, after you're done with Cowboy Conor, let's do it.
Right.
And I see that. I see the division just so loaded. I mean, yes, you had Ben retire, but I think he could be lured back into something exciting, and he could be a stepping stone for somebody like Ben or Matt, after this. Who knows? It's an exciting division, and if Usman stays in it, he's right there, depending on how this fight goes as the guy to kind of, go after next. So we'll see. It's such a fun division. It is so much excitement in it, and there's so many great fighters. And who knows who's going to rise up next and who's going to jump in the mix and who's going to want to. And don't forget, Robbie is coming off the Ben Askren win, and then he had the loss. So Robbie's still lurking in the weeds, as another guy. So fun division. You couldn't ask for anything more. And you brought up Matt and his training and being in that unique location in Ohio. And he and I have talked about this, where he has Westside Barbell, he has his gym, and he has that Ohio,
that wrestling culture,
that grit down there where everybody's training. And it's so exciting. And it's just an environment built around, kicking ass.
Yeah, I think his ground game is definitely underrated because people see him as that striker. But, you got to remember, that's wrestling country. Ohio State's right there. You go over to the Ohio State wrestling room. You get in there. He's got Mark Coleman in his gym training with him. I believe is cornering him this weekend as well. The godfather of ground and pound, the original UFC heavyweight champion. So you walk into Immortal Martial Arts Center, you got all these guys with wrestling background. They're no slouches.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people brought up. Now, Ben is a true jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's not going to want to go you don't want to go up against Ben's, jiu-jitsu, on pure jiu-jitsu. But I think the wrestling and the fighting on the ground is a different animal. So it's going to come down to how this all shakes out, and if he calculates his takedowns properly and incorporates the fighting. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have so much fun. It's going to be a blast to watch. It's going to be one of those days. It's going to be one of those nights. It's going to be so much fun to see play out, and I'm rooting for either side. And hopefully, win or lose, I'll be there, and I'll hopefully be able to bump into one of the guys or say hi or congratulate him, because I'm just so excited to see both of them going at it. Now, Ben is a 10th Planet guy, so I'm excited to see him in it. I'm conflicted. I'm excited to see Matt in it, and I'm just kind of flipping a coin once the fight starts and I say, well, okay, let's see. I root for both of them to have an awesome match. I hope it goes 5. I hope it's exciting. I hope it goes down to the wire, and in the end, I hope they both come out winners, and everybody wants to see them either run it back or whatever. It's not really, UFC style lately, and Dana hasn't been one to run a lot of fights back, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. But I think that there's some meat on that bone, maybe, if it does, create that monster clash. So we'll see what happens. So much fun. There's a couple other female fights. I know Jessica I is going to be fighting it. She's an Ohio native. She's got a big kind of comeback fight there. We'll see how it all plays out. I think we'll have a good time either way. It's exciting to have you in town. I think, at the end of the day, there's so much that we can do in the future with not just the ability to take unique products like coffee into the fight game and have unique fighters like Matt with the rich history that they have and create these brands and see these brands flourish. I'm so excited to see what you guys do in the next 6 months and over the next year, and what you come out with and how things expand after this. But you got to grab the fire while it's hot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. What else do you have on the horizon, and where can everybody find the coffee, and where can everybody buy it?
TheImmortalCoffee.com, or Instagram and Twitter's at Immortal_coffee. All the rest of social media is The Immortal Coffee. You can also find it on Amazon. Working to get a bunch of retailers. If you're in South Florida, We got a bunch of different gyms. I know we're sponsoring a gym called the Goat Shed Academy that just opened up. They've got some of the Nitro cold brew on tap there, a number of different places down there, and really just trying to grow the brand across America. We're actually going to expand and do Immortal Coffee Mexico. So one of our business partners, his uncle is the promoter for Miguel Berchelt, who's the WBC, I believe, super flyweight champion. So Mexico's rich with that boxing history. So we want to bring that martial arts, UFC style down there and promote the brand down there. So we have things like that in the works. And then, expand globally, different products, really tie it into martial arts, health and fitness, and go from there.
Yeah, and it'd be, you got to get down to the PI and just leave a few bags in there kind of laying around, and hopefully they start drinking it in there, get everybody hooked on it. But, it's exciting to watch. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I love the brand, and you guys have done a fantastic job. Now, when people purchase it, do they buy in individual bags, or is there a subscription plan yet?
Well, we have a recurring subscription plan. You get, I believe it's 20% off on that, so people can sign up, and it basically will send you an invoice whenever you want. There's no early termination fees, no contract, nothing like that. So we have the subscription plan. You can get 1 pound bags, or we do a discount if you order 5. And for wholesale, if people want to reach out to us, it's just sales@theimmortalcoffee.com. We work something out with people like that as well. Or you can get on an Amazon Prime or regular Amazon.
Now, if people do the subscription plan and they get into it that way, do you have like a variety pack people can get? Because that's sometimes what people are interested in, or is it just
kind of pick and choose your own right now?
And
we're going to probably do more like sampler packs coming in the future. It's just really with what we do. What we do is we do 16-ounce bags. Most coffee companies tend to do 12-ounce a lot of the time recently. So you get it ground, you get it whole bean. We want to make sure people are getting a full pound. And with our bags, it has I like this, and any coffee company I've ever started, I don't want the tin foil tie because it lets air escape. So what people don't realize is as soon as your coffee's ground or as soon as you get air in there, it starts oxidizing. It starts losing that freshness. So you want to get coffee that's fresh roasted. So we do everything in small batches to ensure that. And we have the Ziploc seal. We have the air valve so you can squeeze the air out of it. There's an aluminum barrier in those bags, too, to block out sunlight. So you want to keep your coffee away from direct sunlight. You want to keep the air out, keep it sealed up. And do not please, people, do not put your coffee in the freezer.
I'm glad you answered that. That was on my mind. The freezer thing.
People do that, and that'll get humidity in there and things that'll affect the coffee. You don't want to do that. It's better to just get your coffee. Like, don't buy coffee for your whole year. It's better to get a couple bags, have them in the house, and just get it because we're always fresh roasting it. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier, our coffee has a very unique taste, and the reason why is the roaster that we use. So the roaster we use is a Habes and Sons roaster designed in Germany in the 1950s and assembled in New York. So you have German engineering, American ingenuity, and there's only 10 of these left in the world, and about 6 as far as we know as in operation, and we have 2 of them in Hialeah in the heart of Miami. That's why we have our Cuban-style coffee in the heart of Miami, and that's where we do our roasting.
Amazing. And this has been like mind-blowing and super informative because I've never thought there was so much that goes into coffee, but you answered the number one question. Does coffee go in the freezer?
Don't put it in the freezer. Do you know how the legend behind how coffee started?
How?
So, as you'll hear this legend discussed a lot, there was a goat herder named Kaldi in Ethiopia.
Juan Valdez.
Well, everybody thinks the Ethiopians are probably pissed off at the Colombians because the Colombians, Juan Valdez gets all the credit, right? And Colombia has great standards for exporting coffee. So you order coffee, a bag of green coffee from Colombia. They come in 70-kilogram bags, which that's where the term beanbag chair came from.
Right.
Because there's these giant, 150-plus pound bags. But they have strict standards. So if you order coffee from Colombia, you're going to actually get your coffee. If you get it from some parts of Africa, you might get sticks and stones. You never know. But getting back to the story, Kaldi was a goat herder in Ethiopia. And one day his goats were out prancing around, and he noticed them eating these little red berries, red cherries, and they were filled with energy dancing around. So he's like, well, what's going on here? They're all happy. So he took it back to town, and they started eating, which is the skin. It's called cascara, which you can still buy, which has a lot of caffeine. It's kind of like a sweet fruit. And then eventually they just started roasting the beans, and it went from there. And then from there, coffee went to Yemen in the Middle East, and then just started spreading throughout the world. So the terms mocha and Java are actually ports in the world where coffee's originally won.
It's amazing. I had no idea. It's an in-depth it's an in-depth process, and there's no doubt, and the growth of it has been really amazing. So I thank you for coming in and sharing the story. And if you guys haven't checked it out, I'll make sure some of the links are down below. Make sure you check out Immortal Coffee. Conor does a fantastic job. If you're interested in carrying the product, or you're anywhere out there in podcast land and you have any questions, don't hesitate to hit them up. He's very responsive on social media, very responsive to the contact page on the website. Give him a shout, check him out, and make sure you use good coffee practices. Don't put it in the freezer. And make sure you use good brew practices, and stay away from K-Cups. They'll ruin your life. So I appreciate everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to come in. I want to thank everyone in the studio. I want to thank everyone in KVAR. And Q, for the meltdown, we got to work on that, man.
Again, I don't know what you're talking about.
I see all kinds of flames and fire coming out of the production room. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure. I'm afraid to walk by.
Disrespect of Juan Valdez, man.
It's crazy. You remember that commercial? How crazy was that with the donkey with the burro? And he was white. I'm Juan Valdez. Today you'd be like
best marketing.
They have at the coffee expos. They have a guy that dresses like that, and takes pictures, and some people really think that's the real guy named Juan Valdez.
He's got to be 100.
Yeah, it's like somebody dressing up as the Colonel from Kentucky Fried Chicken, and people thinking he's the real Colonel.
They just came out with the chicken and waffles.
I saw that.
Yeah, we still got to go there. I can't believe the Juan Valdez thing, though. I remember that commercial like it was yesterday. Juan Valdez. Seriously. We'd get copyright, but I'd love if you showed it, Q. We get slammed. But
yeah, hopefully I don't get sued for saying anything about
other
Starbucks or any other company.
No, of course not. But this was amazing. I really had an awesome time. I appreciate you coming down and spending the time. We're going to definitely have to get together again and do this again, especially with Matt, and hopefully in the future, get an opportunity to kind of see where things are going and have you guys on and talk really about the relationship and how you guys got into it, because this was super informative. So I can't thank you enough.
Yeah,
really
we'll get it. Next time I come on, I'll go through the scientific approach of how coffee and why it has the flavors it has, and start blowing your mind even more. Like I said, I could talk about coffee for hours and hours.
I love it.
Just educate you. That's my favorite thing to do about coffee, is share the information.
Bro, I love it. It's awesome. So I appreciate everyone. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I appreciate everyone in the studio. And Q, hopefully you calm down a little bit before I walk through, because I'm scared. If I don't report, if you don't see me on a podcast again, Q,
I killed him.
Yeah, on the way by. So I appreciate everyone. And Q, take us.